of us, when we start to see the leaves change colors and the temperatures drop, we get excited because that means that fall is here. We might visit an apple orchard, drink a pumpkin spice latte, or cheer on our favorite football team on a Friday night. But here at the Knabush Math and Science Center, some of our animals really start to kick it into overdrive. Some animals like turtles and frogs and skunks and chipmunks, that fall is signifying that it's time to start hibernation. One of our very favorite Knabush Center animals has even shown us on the trail cam that it's starting its preparation for hibernation. Can you guess which animal I'm talking about? That's right, it's the groundhog. Let's go check out some of that footage. Groundhogs are primarily herbivores, feeding on fruits and vegetables and grasses and flowers. On occasion, they may eat a grub or another insect, but it is definitely not their favorite. Sometimes here at the Knabush Math and Science Center, we put our leftover food out, and on those occasions, I've seen our groundhogs favor things like bagels, cookies, and sandwiches, which may sound a little bit weird, but when you think about it, what's the main ingredients of those foods? Wheat. And what is wheat? A plant. So really, it's not that weird. In the spring and the summer, those groundhogs are going to eat pretty much until they're full. But in the fall, they eat and eat and eat. And I know what you're thinking, why are they so hungry? And the answer really is, they aren't yet. In the winter, when the temperatures start to drop and the fruits and veggies die off, the groundhog would be left with nothing to eat. So instead of digging through the snow, trying to find mere morsels of tasteless grass, he's going to hibernate. Now, most people think that hibernation is basically a long nap, but it is so much more than that. When our groundhog begins to hibernate, they start with finding a really safe place. For our groundhog, it's right here underneath this deck. And then they slow their body down. They will start to lower their body temperature, relying solely on their fur and their fat to keep them warm. And then their heartbeat's going to start to slow down. Let's do something real quick. I want you to try to find your heartbeat, or maybe even your pulse. Have you found it? When I say go, I want you to count how many times you feel your heart beat or your pulse go. Are you ready? Go. Stop. How many did you get? I counted 12. Maybe you counted 15. Or 18, or maybe you were super relaxed and you only counted 10. Did you know that if you were a groundhog, that entire time you would have only felt your heartbeat 1, maybe 2 times? They've slowed their body way down because they need to conserve their energy. In the fall, they did all of that voracious eating, and they ate and they ate and they ate. And they only have that much energy to last all winter. And it takes energy to do basically everything. For our heart to beat, for us to talk, for us to move, even for us to digest our food. So they have that limited amount of energy to last all winter. How does that work? It's pretty crazy, but let's check it out. When we eat food, our body uses that food to give us energy. And then that energy is used to pretty much do everything that we need to do in life. So where does that energy come from? Let's take a break from talking about our groundhog and talk about humans, us. So let's say last night I decided to eat a tasty piece of pizza. That pizza is going to begin being broken down by my digestive system. It's broken down mechanically into smaller pieces by my teeth, and then chemically broken down into even smaller pieces with the acids in my stomach. So those pieces it can be broken down into typically fall into 3 categories: carbohydrates, lipids or fats, or proteins. Each one of those molecules, carbohydrates, lipids, or proteins, do something a little bit different for our body. So carbohydrates are really good at giving us quick energy. They can be found in our grains and our sugars, both natural sugars like fructose in our fruits and those sugars found in our sweets. Lipids, like found in meats and dairy and oils, are really good at storing energy. Remember that. Then proteins that are found in things like meat, Dairy, nuts, and soy can help us build muscles and bones and also fight disease. So let's inspect our pizza for what molecules it has. If we take a look at the crust, we see that it's mostly grains, so that's carbohydrates. Looking at the sauce, it's made out of tomatoes and herbs, which would also be carbohydrates because those are natural sugars found in plants. So if we inspect the cheese, we know that cheese is dairy, so we know that it has to have proteins in it. But when you cook cheese, it gets that thin layer of grease on the top. That grease is a lipid, so our cheese has both our proteins and our lipids. Thinking about our pepperoni, we can think the same route. It's meat, so we know there's proteins in it, but also when you cook it, it gets greasy and crisp up, and that's a sign that it has lipids as well. So our pizza has all three types of food categories: carbohydrates, lipids, and proteins. Today then, I could go ahead and run a race or just walk around and live my life and get my energy from those quick carbohydrates. The proteins could be helping me fight off a disease or build my muscles and bones up. And then those lipids could just hang back on my body. And let's be honest, if we eat too many lipids, we'll get a lot of lipids hanging back on our body. But they're gonna help me if I ever run out of carbohydrates. So let's say I get stranded in the woods and I can't find any food. Those lipids are going to help give me energy to move around and hopefully get help as well. So now let's go back to our groundhog. He spends all fall eating as much as possible. It needs some of those carbohydrates to give him the energy to keep on moving and find more food and to live its life in the fall, but not all of them. Its body is already storing away its lipids that it eats, and it's using the proteins to help build up its body structure. But all of those extra carbohydrates that it doesn't need can do something really interesting. There's a process in the body that can rearrange those molecules and atoms in all of those extra carbohydrates and turn them into body fat to be used later. Pretty cool, right? So the energy that the groundhog uses to live its life essentially come from carbohydrates. But can we back that up even further? The grains and sugars that made up carbohydrates were found in plants like wheat and carrots. But could we trace where that plant got its energy from? When that seed was really small, it needed energy in order to grow and develop. But they don't just eat food like we do. Plants are known as autotrophs or producers, meaning they make their own food using a process called photosynthesis. So for a small seedling to grow and develop and to complete that process of photosynthesis, it needs three things. If you've ever grown a plant, you know that you have to water it. So water is the very first thing that you need. The second thing the plant needs is air, or more specifically, carbon dioxide. And what's really cool is that we can give the plants our carbon dioxide when we blow out. So those two things, water and carbon dioxide, are just molecules. They don't have the energy to turn into food. So that's where you've guessed it, the sun comes into play. Sunlight is captured by a part of the cell called the chloroplast. That chloroplast then is able to take the energy from the sun, break up those bonds in water and carbon dioxide, and rearrange them to make them food, more specifically, sugar. So when we think about it, the energy that a groundhog uses to live its life ultimately comes from the sun. Tell me that's not fascinating. So let's put it all together. Our groundhog doesn't want to deal with cold temperatures and finding food in the winter, so instead it hibernates. In order to do that, in the fall it needs to eat lots of food. The lipids that it eats are going to be stored as fat, and the extra carbohydrates that it eats is going to be converted into fat. Those carbohydrates were basically sugars from plants that use the process of photosynthesis. Photosynthesis uses the sun to power its reaction. So in a weird roundabout way, the energy that a groundhog or any animal uses to live its life was once energy from the sun. I don't know about you, but I think that makes science pretty cool.